Hey guys, it's Chris. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and in this video I would like to show you how I built this sort of stylized material in Substance Designer. This is actually a bit of challenge for myself as well. Stylized art is not really my proficiency, but it was really fun to work on this and try to discover these distinctive shapes and play around with the color. So yeah, it was fun to make that. And here is the graph, and you should be able to make this sort of nature environment material after watching the notes that I'm about to show you. So yeah, let's get started. So start with the ground. For anything muddy or just normal dirty surface, I like to start with the clouds. So I got this clouds 2 and the clouds 3, and followed by this histogram scan, because I want to make these shapes more obvious. So adding this gram scan to bring up the contrast a little bit, and then use the blur if you think it's necessary to blur out some of the details, and then just blend them together. And so basically this is the base shape of the ground, but you don't want the black and white to be this contrasty, so I use the histogram range to kill some of the values, and then I just blend this node with this dirt node, dirt 4. Also use the histogram scan so the detail is not too intense, and then when you blend them together, and here you got this let me show you in this 3D graph here. So basically you get something like that. Since I'm doing a stylized material, I don't want to spend too much time on the details of the mud or the surface, because you're going to cover a lot of stuff on top of it. And it just add another level. So this level helps to make this ground a little bit more bumpy. And then let's take a look at these rocks. So for the big rocks, I like to start with the cells node, especially the cells 4, but instead of just using a normal, instead of just using a normal cells 4 node, because once you got that, you can definitely play around with the scale. You can do disorder, but to make it more customized, you can make a shape like this. So here I use the pretty noise and add a level and invert that to get a shape like this, and I bring this to this input. And now, so for the color source, and you can use the image input here. So now this gives you a more customized look. Anyway, followed by a histogram scan, I got this mask for my big rocks. And then, so a common way of making rocks, especially the surface details on the rocks, so you can use the flat fill node, and once you have this, almost looks like a normal map, you can use this flat gradient. So basically you can play around with this parameters to get different values, like you can rotate, stuff like that. And I just made duplicate 4, so I got 4 different gradients, and I just blend them together. So this is the final blend from all these 4 nodes, and this won't be enough because you want to add some extra details for the rocks. So so what I got here, this is why I'm using this edge detect, because I also want some values on the edge of the rocks. So what I got here is I use this edge shape and bring this to the slope blur grayscale and with the Perlin noise, so you got some values around the edges, and then blend this together with the gradients, and then once you got that, so here you're gonna use this mask to mask out the areas that you don't want. And on top of that, and on top of these rocks, and I just use the same method, the slope blur method, edge detect, bevel, and slope blur by using the Perlin noise, and also add a bit of directional warp. And also here I got some more small details, and blend them all together like that, which you're gonna see later. So these are the big rocks. So let me show you. And then for the small rocks, I use a faster way to make the small rocks, because you want to spend more time on the big ones because they are the main details on the material. And the small ones, you can use an easier way or quicker way, but also very efficient. So start with the tail sampler. I just use this round shape and I made 6 of this, and then I just add another cell. This time I use a cells 1, and just blur that shape out a little bit and blend that with the tail sampler. And by using the subtract, so I got this blurred rock shape here, and add a histogram scan, I got this nice and solid rock shape as a mask to blend with this. And actually here I didn't use all these 6 rocks, I just used 4 by using this crop grayscale. So just pick the ones that you like and bring this back in the tail sampler to make sure these small rocks are not sitting on top of these large ones. So you just need a mask here. So this mask is come from these large rocks. So bring that here, and you're gonna go to the color and mask map invert true, and just play around with the threshold, and then you will have, and just randomize the position of these small rocks and the scale as well, and you will have something like this after use the histogram scan. This is also going to be the mask for the small rocks, and then you can blend these together. So this is going to be the mask for all the rocks. And before we move on to the height blend, we're going to talk about the grass. And for the grass, I just use a very simple method here, which is also a very common way. So I just use this wave shape node and turn this and blur out the shape to get a more smooth silhouette. And you're gonna play around with this gradient linear nodes just to make sure you get some gradients like this, and blend them together with the multiply. And the reason why I add a bit of darker value at the bottom is because you don't want the details at the bottom of the grass to be very sharp. You want to make it feel like this is growing from the bottom to the top. To make different shapes from the same grass I made here, I just used the curve node. So the curve node is really helpful when you combine that with the directional warp, because so see, these curve nodes are all linked with this gradient linear one, and then you just play around with this curve, and you can get different values like this or that, and then you just bring that to the directional warp with the shape selected, and you will have different silhouettes of the grass. And to make sure this grass are growing properly on the ground, a trick that you have to use is to, so once you've done that, it's not finished yet, and also make sure it looks like the grass is growing from the ground. You want to bring the bottom at the center, almost at the center of this square, and similar and the same on this one and this one. Make sure you don't cut the top of the shape. So once you bring these patterns, these grass patterns to the tail sampler, you're gonna make decisions on how you want your grass to grow. I wanted to let the grass grow on around the large rocks, but not like in a rigid sort of order. So I just combined this large rock mask with another random pattern. So I eventually got like a mask like this. So add this to the scale map input. The grass is still everywhere, but the area that's close to this black value is going to be real tiny and small. And you can, of course, play around with the scale, see how small or how big you want them to be, right? And also I use this large rock mask and add a normal map on top of it and bring this to the vector map input. This is just going to help to make the grass grow in a more natural way. Say if you don't want this little grass at all, because it does look a bit weird here, let's say you can kill this completely by using the mask, same mask that I used for the scale input. So just bring this to the mask map input and go to color and turn this to true, and if you bring this up, I think I plugged in the wrong mask. Okay, so it's supposed to be this one. Okay, so see, it already starts working. So yeah, if you just don't want them at all, you can just kill them by using the mask and then just bring this to the mask map input and play around with this mask map threshold. Okay, so let's move on to the leaves. It's a similar principle, or let's say same way of building this grass here. It's the gradient linear nodes blended with the shape node. There's no like certain way of building this. Like this gradients is totally depend on how you want your shape to look like. So what I got here is something roundish. I want this sort of little heart looking leaves, so I got a gradient like this and bring this to the directional warp, so it sort of make the shape like this. And I use the same gradient for this for a different heart shape. So at the bottom I made a more complicated shape here, so using the shape node and just tilt that a little bit and mirror grayscale, so I have a shape that looks like that. So bring this shape to a splatter circular node, so I have something like this. So just basically duplicate this shape and in a circular way, and this is going to be the edge of the leaf. And then I use another I just use another gradient pattern that I made from here. I just invert that and bring this to the directional warp. So just the direction would be, it could be up and down. Just depends how you want them to look like. Let's say I want them to go up, so it's going up like that, and just play around with the intensity. And then once you got the shape like this, you can blend that with a heart shape at the bottom. So I will have something like that. What I did next is to just made another shape like that. This is gonna be the details at the center of the leaf, and bring this to both of them. So here's this one, and here. Okay, before I add that, also usually to get that sort of effect, you want the center to be a little bit light, at the edge a bit darker, and then I just add the line center and blend this shape with this one. And for the one on the top, I just use the splatter circular again, just to create different patterns, and I just add some darker values at the center for each pattern with this little black circle at the center, and bring this to this tail sampler. And the same on this one, just bring this pattern straight to the tail, another tail sampler. And the way how I map this is exactly the same as the grass. Just use the mask from the rock. I want them to grow on the ground instead of lying on top of the rocks. And for these fallen leaves, they could be sitting on top of the grass. That's why I didn't add the map for this one. And before I move on to the height blend, I'm just gonna quickly talk about these branches, and I will talk about just one of them because everything else I made with the exactly same method. Let's say take this one as an example. I started by making the little details on the branch. So I used this branch map 05 and use a safe transformation to make the pattern smaller. And then on this, I always like to use this height pass grayscale because it gives a really nice gray, black and white value here. So I use this, just bring down the value a little bit. Use this on this branch here. So now let's talk about this shape, which is similar as how I made the grass as well. So just say you start with a shape like that, very simple, and then you just blur that out and use the polynoise, put them into the directional warp. Basically, because this polynoise gives you a random shape like that, and then because with the same method you can make all different kinds of shapes, and then just use the histogram skin and make the shape nice and sharp, and blend with this blurred one, so you get this little details here. And of course, after blend with the pattern inside, I just used the small branches I created here, just place them around so it looks like something like this. And see, this is all different big branches. You can actually find more information from the Substance, the official Substance channel, because they show you a lot how to build this wooden textures more in depth. And then I use this tail sampler to make these small branches. So for the small branches, I just use another tail sampler and just placing them randomly with slightly different values, and also use the mask from the rock just to make sure they don't sit on top of them. And then I just blend them together. Because I want these branches, these large ones, to be not just bigger in shape, but also bigger in the height information. So that's why you need these ones to be lighter, like way lighter than these small ones. So if I just bring this one here, so you can see these ones are a lot bigger. Okay, now let's talk about how I bring these objects together. Start with this height blend. So the rocks sitting on the height top, and the ground is at the bottom. So by playing around with this height offset, you will have these rocks sitting on top of the ground. But because the rock is a lot higher, it actually covers what's underneath on the ground. But this height blend node won't work properly let's say if you blend with something similar, let's say something really close to the ground. This is the bottom area, and you want to bring this on top of the ground without showing any details on the ground under this non-uniform blur. So this is the ground. See, by adding this grass shape, it's gonna blur out everything that you're about to cover on top of it, and then you just use another blend node to blend the shape on top of it by using the add linear dodge, and you can play around with this opacity just to see how you want this to look like. So basically use exactly the same method, and I got this final height map. Just to see how it looks like without the ambient occlusion. There's a bit of ambient occlusion, just not obviously. So, and once you are happy with the way how everything sits on top of each other, and you can just start basically bring this material to life. So let's say start with the normal. So I just combine the normal map of the rocks and the ground with the branches and the leaves. I use the mask here to make sure the branches and the leaves are not sitting on top of the rocks and the ground properly. And then just bring this to the final normal node, which is the output. And also the benefits of using this normal blend is that you can control the intensity of these objects. Next is the roughness. So I just use the normal map and just bring that to the curvature smooth, and add the auto level and just invert that. I always make my roughness map like in this way. It almost becomes a formula. And there's no metallic on this material, so it's just gonna stay black. And for ambient occlusion, I just use the one straight from this height blend and just play around with this height depth. And the height is straight, come from here. And for the color, it's kind of straightforward. You just use the gradient map and choose the colors that you like. Just for those of you who don't know about the alpha function, so basically, so this is the grayscale grass, and you just bring that to the gradient map. Let's say so once you open the gradient editor, usually the one on the very left is the black value. A represent alpha. So if I bring this back to 55, it's basically gonna cover the ground, which is not what you want. So I just bring this back to 0, which is opacity, and basically use exactly the same method on everything. And one trick that I did, so say this is the final colors that I'm happy with, but if I want to give it a slightly let's just change this 3D view here. After I got all the colors for each object, I can use this color straight on the base color output. So it looks like something like this, which is okay. But let's say if I want to tone the whole material a little bit, just to give it a bit more character, what I did was I used this ambient occlusion, bring this grayscale value to this gradient map node, and then basically just use this gradient editor and then pick a color that I want to if I want a warm tone, then I just pick something warm. If I want cold, I pick something cold. And then let's say if you look at, there is quite a big difference. If I just bring this one in here, it actually gives a nice warm ish shadow. And yeah, I think this is everything I'd like to cover for this video, and I hope you learned something from this. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.